What if the most powerful thing you could ever say is nothing at all? You've tried explaining yourself. You've pleaded. You've cried. You've given second chances when you barely had anything left to give. And still, it wasn't enough. They didn't hear you. They didn't see the weight you carried just to keep the peace. The truth is, some people aren't wired to understand until the silence gets loud enough to echo in their own mind. Until you stop speaking. Until you vanish from the noise they created. That's when the shift begins, not in them, but in you. You don't need to raise your voice to reclaim your power. You don't need to prove your worth by staying longer in a place where your soul is shrinking. There comes a moment when walking away quietly is the most powerful thing you'll ever do, because silence isn't empty. It's full of the truth they refuse to hear. And when you stop giving them your energy, your reactions, your presence, they're left alone with the one thing they can't manipulate, their own thoughts. Detachment isn't weakness. It's not cold or heartless. It's the decision to stop begging for love where only control exists. It's choosing to protect your peace over proving your point. You're not walking away because you're giving up. You're walking away because you finally remembered who you are. And when you do that without warning, without explanation, without the need to defend yourself, it shatters the illusion they had about you. Suddenly, the person they thought they could keep on a string disappears, and the silence you leave behind becomes the loudest sound in their world. You become the question they can't answer, the mystery that unsettles their ego, the calm storm they didn't see coming. And while they spiral, trying to figure out how and why you left so quietly, you'll finally begin to breathe again. No more rehearsing conversations that never change. No more waiting for apologies that never come. No more explaining yourself to people who choose not to understand. This is your moment of freedom. The moment where your power returns, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A quiet exit that leaves a lasting mark. You're not here to beg for a seat at a table that disrespects you. You're here to build your own table, your own peace, your own life. And every second you stay silent, every step you take away from their chaos, is another step toward your clarity. So don't wait for the perfect words. Don't wait for them to suddenly change. Detach quietly. Let them feel the absence. Let them hear the silence. And while their mind begins to collapse without you, you'll rise into a life that finally reflects your worth. Stay with me. Because what comes next is how you take back everything they tried to steal. Your voice, your dignity, your power. You're not lost. You're just getting started. They expected you to break. They counted on your silence meaning defeat. But what they didn't expect was for your silence to be the weapon. The kind that slices through their illusions and exposes the truth they've been hiding from themselves. When you detach quietly, you're not disappearing. You're shifting the balance. You're forcing a confrontation they can't avoid anymore. And it doesn't happen with noise. It happens in the stillness after you leave, when there's no one left to blame, no one left to distract from the damage they caused, no one left to absorb the weight of their denial. Some people only understand value through loss. They never saw your presence as a privilege. They treated it like a guarantee. They drained your energy while you kept showing up, thinking love meant endurance. But love isn't pain. Love isn't begging for basic respect. Love isn't staying where your soul is constantly questioned. And when you finally walk away, not out of anger but out of clarity, something powerful happens. The illusion of control they held begins to unravel. Because control only works when you keep participating. When you leave the game, the rules collapse. You gave them every opportunity to meet you halfway. You communicated. You forgave. You stayed longer than anyone else would have. But none of it made them change. That's not your failure. That's their choice. And now, you're making yours. To remove your energy from a space that doesn't honor it. To stop explaining your worth to people who choose to be blind. To stop reacting, because your silence speaks louder than your pain ever could. Let them sit with the silence. Let them sit with themselves. Because once the noise is gone, the mind gets loud. And when you're no longer there to absorb their chaos, their thoughts become their torment. That's when they begin to hear what you were trying to say all along. Not through your words, but through your absence. That's when the collapse begins. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped holding everything up. You were the stabilizer, the one who kept the structure from falling. And now that you're gone, the walls start to crack. That's the part they never saw. How much strength it took just to stay. How many times you chose peace over pride. How many times you carried the weight of their wounds while ignoring your own. But that chapter is over now. This is your healing, your reclaiming, your return to self-respect. Silence isn't passive. It's the space where transformation begins. You didn't lose anything by walking away. You regained yourself. And as their mind collapses under the pressure of its own lies, you rise. Not with noise, not with revenge, but with peace. Real, unshakable peace. The kind they'll never find until they face what you already survived. Keep going. There's nothing behind you worth turning back for. Ahead is where your power lives, and this time, you're not shrinking for anyone. You're done explaining. You're done chasing. Now you just move. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 96B7C1C94C4F5B2EID. There's a strange kind of freedom in being misunderstood. When you stop trying to explain yourself, you start to feel the weight lift, the pressure to be seen, to be validated, to be accepted by people who never truly listened. It dissolves, because the moment you realize their version of you was never real, you stop fighting to correct it. Let them believe what they want. Let them tell the story that fits their comfort. You no longer need to participate in the illusion. You are no longer trapped in the role they assigned you. Your silence rewrites everything, not because you're hiding, but because you're healing. You're not giving them the satisfaction of your pain. You're not feeding their need for conflict or attention. You're not returning to the cycle that broke your spirit. When you detach without drama, you don't just walk away from them. You walk back into yourself. You reclaim every piece of you that was scattered in their chaos. And while they try to understand the silence, you're building something they never expected. Peace, clarity, power. People often confuse detachment with bitterness. But there's nothing bitter about protecting your peace. There's nothing cruel about choosing yourself. Detachment doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you finally realized they never did. And when you see that clearly, the attachment begins to break. You stop waiting for them to come around. You stop hoping they'll finally see your worth. You stop giving them the power to define your value. Their mind begins to collapse not because you hurt them, but because you stopped giving them a place to hide from themselves. You stopped playing the role they depended on. You were their mirror, their comfort, their scapegoat. And now, you're gone. They're left staring at the void where you used to be, and in that silence, the truth echoes. They're not angry at your silence. They're terrified of it. Because it speaks of something final, something irreversible, something they can't fix with manipulation or fake apologies. Let them feel it. Let them wrestle with it. You don't need to interfere. You don't need to check in. You don't need to respond. The power isn't in what you say. It's in what you withhold. It's in the distance. It's in the refusal to engage. That's how healing starts. Not by dragging the past behind you, but by refusing to carry it one step further. You owe no one an explanation for protecting your peace. You owe no one a return to a place that stole your voice, and the more you honor that truth, the more unstoppable you become. They may never admit what they lost, but they'll feel it. They already do. And as their mind spins in search of the person you used to be, you'll realize something profound. You were never the one collapsing. You were the foundation. You were the strength. You were the clarity they couldn't handle. And now that you've stepped away, it all falls apart without you. You never needed to scream to be heard. You just needed to stop speaking to the wrong ears. Some people can only hear the sound of their own voice, only see the world through the lens of their own needs. And the more you tried to reach them, the more invisible you became. That's why silence is so powerful. It disrupts their comfort. It interrupts their fantasy. It forces them to finally face the truth you were trying to express all along. Not through words, but through absence. And that absence, it echoes. When you stop feeding the cycle, it starves. When you stop chasing, it collapses. When you stop explaining, they're left with questions they don't know how to answer. That's what happens when you walk away without noise. You remove the distraction, and what's left is the mirror they can't avoid. You are the buffer, the emotional sponge, the person who took the hits and softened the consequences. Now, without you, reality hits harder. It cuts deeper, and no one is there to absorb the impact. You didn't break them. You just stopped saving them. You stopped lowering your standards to hold their world together. You stopped setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, and now, they're cold. Not because you're cruel, but because they never learned how to create warmth on their own. You were the one carrying the emotional weight, and the moment you put it down, everything they built on your back began to crumble. Let it. You are not responsible for the collapse of a structure built on lies. You are responsible for rising from the rubble and rebuilding yourself in truth. You're allowed to walk away from what drained you. You're allowed to leave quietly, without permission, without a dramatic goodbye. You're allowed to choose peace over explanation, and when you do, you stop being a prisoner of someone else's confusion. You become the architect of your own clarity. There is power in letting go with grace. There is strength in refusing to prove your worth one more time. Not everyone deserves your side of the story. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your truth. Sometimes, the greatest lesson you give is your disappearance. It's the silence after the storm, the stillness that demands reflection. And while they spiral in confusion, you are steady, grounded, free. This is how you reclaim your power, not through revenge, not through retaliation, but through removal. Quiet, complete removal. You don't need to slam the door. You just need to walk through it. And when they finally realize you're not coming back, the collapse becomes permanent. Not because you destroyed anything, but because you stopped being the reason it held together. You're not the aftermath. You're the awakening. And now that you've stepped out of the storm, you can finally hear something else. Your own voice. Clear, unshaken, whole. Let it guide you forward. Let it remind you they needed you more than you ever needed them. And now they know. They will replay everything. Every word you didn't say. Every moment you didn't respond. Every silence that didn't come with closure. That's the cost of underestimating someone who finally sees their own worth. When you leave without noise, without warning, without giving them the satisfaction of control, their mind does what your voice never could. It turns on itself. It analyzes, obsesses, spirals. They're searching for the version of you they once manipulated, but that version no longer exists. You outgrew it. You outgrew them. And now, their power collapses in the silence you left behind. You see, people become addicted to the attention they don't deserve. The reactions, the emotions, the access. And as long as you respond, they believe they still have influence. But the second you go quiet, the fantasy ends. The delusion breaks. The power shift is undeniable. Because silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the absence of permission. You're no longer participating in the game, no longer entertaining the performance, no longer sacrificing your peace for someone else's comfort. And that is what drives them mad. They thought you'd always be there, always forgiving, always explaining, always absorbing the pain and pretending it was love. But you learned that love doesn't require you to lose yourself. You learned that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's choosing peace over chaos. It's choosing truth over illusion. And it's the most terrifying thing to someone who built their identity on your silence. Now, they have to face the emptiness they masked with your presence. And that emptiness is loud. That silence is heavy. It forces them to sit with every lie, every manipulation, every missed opportunity to do better. And the worst part for them? There's no one left to blame, no distraction, no scapegoat, just the echo of your absence and the weight of their own choices. But for you, this is not a loss. It's a return. A return to your boundaries, a return to your value, a return to the version of yourself that doesn't need to beg, chase, or explain. You don't need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to shrink to be loved. You don't need to be louder. You need to be gone. Let them unravel. Let their mind collapse under the weight of what they took for granted. That's not your burden to carry. Your responsibility is to protect your peace, guard your energy, and move forward with grace, without apology, without regret, without looking back. This is what strength looks like now. It's quiet, it's firm, it's unshakable. And as they sit in the silence, trying to find the version of you they once controlled, you rise into the version of you that no one ever will again. Let the silence speak. Let it echo. Let it be the reminder that you were the peace they never knew how to keep. They never expected you to stop showing up. Not really. They relied on your loyalty. They depended on your forgiveness. They thought you would always come back, no matter how many times they crossed the line. But every time you stayed silent when you should have spoken, every time you minimized your needs to protect their comfort, you lost a piece of yourself. And now, you finally reclaimed it. Not through confrontation, not through chaos, but through absence. You didn't need to scream to make an impact. You just had to stop showing up for someone who never truly showed up for you. That's what shakes them. Not the words you said, but the words you withheld. Not the storm you caused, but the stillness you left behind. There is no reaction to study, no tone to twist, no message to manipulate. Just space, just distance, just silence. And that silence forces reflection. It forces awareness. It becomes a mirror that doesn't lie. One they can't avoid, can't mute, can't escape. Because your quiet departure didn't just remove your voice, it removed their cover. You were the distraction from the truth they never wanted to face. Now they have to sit in it. And while their world trembles under the weight of that silence, yours begins to rise. Because the moment you detach without explanation is the moment you declare, without words, that your peace matters more than their approval, that your sanity is more important than their validation, that your healing is no longer on hold for someone else's growth. That is strength, that is transformation, and it begins the moment you decide that you don't owe your pain to anyone, not even the one who caused it. You don't leave quietly because you're weak. You leave quietly because you're done trying to be understood by someone who was never listening, done pouring into a well that never filled you, done asking for the bare minimum and calling it love. You've realized that peace is louder than any argument, and distance teaches what words never could. This isn't revenge, it's revelation. You're not trying to hurt them, you're just done letting them hurt you. Now they are left with the silence they used to ignore. But silence, when it's all that remains, becomes deafening. It haunts the spaces where your voice used to be. It fills the gaps they once dismissed. It becomes the consequence they never saw coming. And while they're unraveling in the emptiness they created, you are building something new, something sacred, something grounded in truth. You are not what they said you were. You are not defined by their inability to love you. You are the one who walked away when staying meant losing yourself. And that decision, that quiet, powerful choice, is the beginning of everything you've been waiting for. You didn't need to announce your departure. You just needed to mean it. And now, without you, the silence tells the story they never wanted to hear. You didn't just leave a person. You left a pattern, a cycle, a version of yourself that tolerated too much, accepted too little, and stayed far too long in places where your heart was never safe. That kind of detachment doesn't come from pride, it comes from pain. Deep, quiet pain that taught you everything words could not. You learned that begging someone to see your value only teaches them how much more they can take without giving anything in return. So you stopped speaking. You stopped chasing. You let the silence say what your soul is tired of repeating. And now, that silence is a storm in their mind. Because they feel it, the absence, the missing energy, the space where your presence used to soothe, where your voice used to explain, where your love used to patch up the damage they refused to fix. They feel the emptiness you left behind, and for the first time, they don't know how to fill it. You were the constant, the one who stayed, the one who forgave, the one who made excuses for the pain. But you're not that person anymore. You woke up, and when you did, everything changed. It takes strength to walk away quietly, to leave without making noise, to remove yourself without revenge. But the most powerful moves are the ones made in silence. Not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown the need to be heard by those who never listened. You've outgrown the need to be chosen by those who only wanted control. You've outgrown the need to keep bleeding just to prove your love. Now your silence is the proof, the evidence that you've healed enough to let go, that you've found enough self-respect to stop pleading for scraps, that you've finally chosen yourself without needing anyone's permission. That's what they can't handle, not your anger, not your hurt, but your peace, the kind of peace that can't be touched, can't be manipulated, can't be used against you. It terrifies them because it means you've truly gone. Not physically, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually. There's nothing left for them to hold on to. Let them feel the loss. Let them sit in the silence they once used to dismiss you. You're not cruel for leaving. You're courageous for surviving, for stepping away from what tried to convince you that you were too much or not enough, for choosing your healing over their chaos, for choosing truth over illusion, for choosing growth over guilt. You didn't just walk away. You leveled up. You became untouchable. And the mind that once thought it had you figured out is now collapsing under the weight of your transformation. That's the power of detaching quietly. It doesn't just remove you from the chaos, it forces them to face who they are without your light to distract from their darkness. And in that space, the truth becomes unavoidable. You were never the problem. You were the glue. And without you, everything begins to fall apart. It was never about proving anything. It was about preserving everything you kept giving away. Your time, your energy, your spirit. You gave pieces of yourself to someone who didn't know how to hold them, who treated your presence as a convenience rather than a gift. And when you finally withdrew, when you stopped explaining, stopped reaching, stopped bending, the silence you left behind wasn't just empty, it was alive. Alive with the weight of everything they ignored, everything they took for granted, everything they believed would never leave. Now they're left with the version of themselves that existed before you arrived. Only now, they feel the contrast, the difference. The absence of the calm you used to bring, the lack of emotional safety they never realized was coming from you. They don't just miss you. They miss who they thought they were when they had access to your heart. They miss the illusion of strength they borrowed from your stability, but now they're exposed. Because when the anchor detaches, the ship drifts. And no matter how much they try to replace you, there's no substitute for authenticity. You never needed to shout your worth. You just needed to stop surrounding yourself with people who refuse to see it. You were never too much. You were just too real for people who live in emotional scarcity. And the moment you stopped shrinking, the dynamic cracked, the balance tipped, the illusion broke. You didn't abandon them. You rescued yourself. You made a decision, not out of hate but out of love for the one person you've ignored far too long, yourself. Let them wonder why you left. Let them search for a version of you that no longer exists. That version, the one who tolerated, who explained, who excused, was built for survival, not for growth. But now, you've chosen growth. You've chosen peace. You've chosen silence over struggle, clarity over confusion, stillness over noise. And it speaks louder than anything you could have said, because when you stop trying to fix what was never yours to carry, you stop bleeding for people who don't know how to heal. They will replay the last moment. They will scan the silence for clues. But the only truth that remains is this: they lost access to someone who was never theirs to control. And that loss is their awakening, not your burden. You've already awakened. You've already let go. Now your job is to keep walking forward, even if it's quiet, even if it's lonely, even if it's unfamiliar, because what's ahead of you is freedom. Freedom from cycles, freedom from noise, freedom from the heavy illusion that you needed to earn love by enduring pain. You are no longer available to people who can't meet you where you are, and as their mind wrestles with the silence, you stand tall in the stillness, whole, free, untouched. They expected your silence to be temporary. They didn't realize it was the sound of finality, and that silence, it's your power now. Silence strips away illusion. It peels back every false narrative, every excuse, every layer of control they used to keep you close. And when you finally go quiet, when you no longer defend your heart or explain your absence, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. They can feel it. Something is different. Not just in you, but around them. The air is heavier, the space colder, because it wasn't your voice they needed, it was your presence. And now that it's gone, they're left alone with the reality they spent so long avoiding. You were the one holding everything together. They never imagined you would stop trying. They thought your compassion meant weakness. They mistook your consistency for dependence. But your silence is not surrender. It is separation. It is the boundary they refuse to respect, now drawn in a way they cannot cross. Not with words, not with guilt, not with regret. The bridge is burned without flames, and what remains is the unmistakable echo of your strength. And that strength terrifies them. Because they know, if you can detach without a word, you've already healed past the point of return. This is the part they didn't see coming. That the same heart they overlooked would become the silence that ruins their peace. That the same soul they wounded would be the one they could no longer reach. And now, their thoughts are loud. They can't silence them. They can't escape them. Because your absence is louder than your presence ever was. It fills the room. It haunts the quiet. It reminds them over and over again of what they broke and can never rebuild. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about you. About the freedom that comes when you stop trying to control the outcome. About the power you regain when you stop handing your worth to people who don't know how to hold it. This is what healing looks like. It's not always beautiful, but it's honest. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. You had to lose them to find yourself. You had to go silent to hear your own voice again. And now that you've heard it, you won't go back to whispering just to be accepted. Let the silence stand. Let it teach what your words never could. Let it remind them of the value they once dismissed. But more than that, let it remind you of who you've become. Not bitter, not broken, just clear. Clear about your boundaries, clear about your value, clear about what you will no longer tolerate. You're not waiting for closure. You're not hoping they understand. You're not holding your breath for apology or change. You've given all the chances, all the explanations, all the pieces. Now, you give yourself peace. And as they sit in the collapse of their own choices, you walk forward, free from the weight of proving anything to anyone. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of everything they couldn't give you. And now, it belongs to you. They can feel it now, the gap you left. Not just your voice, but your energy, your grounding presence, your calm in their storm. You were the balance they didn't realize they depended on until it disappeared. You were the stillness in their chaos, the understanding they never earned but always expected. And now, in your absence, the reality is undeniable. The collapse isn't loud. It doesn't happen in a moment. It creeps in slowly, through every silence they can't fill, every emotion they can't deflect, every truth they can no longer outrun. Because the mind cannot unfeel presence, and it cannot ignore absence. Once you've experienced real connection, its disappearance leaves a void that cannot be replaced by distractions or ego. They're remembering everything now. Every time you listened, every time you stayed when you should have walked away. Every time you offered grace they didn't deserve. But now, there's nothing. No explanation, no resistance, no emotional reaction for them to twist into blame. Only silence, only space. And in that space, their own voice is the only one left, and it's no longer convincing. This is what happens when you remove yourself from people who only valued your availability, not your heart. They're not grieving who you are. They're grieving what you gave. The access, the care, the unconditional effort, the emotional shelter they used but never respected. But what they never understood was that your love came with limits, quiet ones, gentle ones, but real limits. And now, they've been crossed, not with one action, but with a pattern of disrespect, of dismissiveness, of entitlement. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started caring about yourself, about your peace, about your sanity, about your future. You reached a point where explaining became exhausting, and staying became a form of self-betrayal. And so you walked away without ceremony, without announcements, not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much to keep sacrificing yourself for someone who refused to grow. Now you've found something irreplaceable: clarity. You see things as they are, not as you hoped they would be. You're no longer waiting for someone to become who they pretended to be. You're no longer hoping your silence will be broken by a call, a message, a sudden realization. You don't need any of it, because this silence, the one they find unbearable, has become your sanctuary, your protection, your reminder that you are done giving your light to people who only live in shadows. Let them sit with it. Let them feel the weight of everything they once ignored. And as they spiral in search of the version of you that no longer exists, keep rising, keep choosing yourself, keep walking in the quiet confidence of someone who no longer seeks validation in the places that broke them. Your detachment is not rejection, it's liberation. And that silence they hear, that's what freedom sounds like. There's a moment in every person's life when they stop negotiating their worth, when the fear of being alone becomes smaller than the pain of being misunderstood, when the need to be chosen is finally replaced by the decision to choose peace. You've reached that moment, and there's no going back, not to the noise, not to the cycle, not to the place where you had to over-explain your value just to feel seen. That version of you, the one who stayed silent to keep the peace, who settled just to feel safe, who kept waiting for them to get it, is gone. And in its place stands someone unshakable. You didn't detach to punish them. You detached to protect yourself. Because healing teaches you what survival never could, that not everyone deserves access to your soul, that your energy is sacred, that your presence is powerful, and when it's no longer available, people notice. They notice the shift, they feel the weight, they hear the silence, not just as an absence but as a reckoning, because your absence forces them to meet the parts of themselves you shielded them from. The flaws, the patterns, the truth. You were the mirror, and now, without you, there's nothing left to reflect back but themselves. Let that be enough. Let your exit be the message. You don't need to clarify, correct, or revisit. You don't need to prove that you were right, that you were hurt, that you deserved more. You know it. And that knowing is enough. It's your closure. It's your power. It's your freedom. You've reclaimed the part of you that believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. And now, you're writing a new story, one where you don't break yourself to fix others, one where your peace is non-negotiable, one where your silence is your strength. They may try to reach out, not because they've changed, but because they miss the version of themselves they were in your presence. But don't mistake missing you for realizing your worth. Missing you is easy. Changing for you is not. And until they face the collapse without blaming you for it, they remain unworthy of the version of you that rises from it. You are no longer here to explain what should be obvious. You are no longer here to wait for someone to become who they promised they already were. You are no longer here to teach someone how to love you while they continue to hurt you. You are here to grow, to expand, to protect your peace at all costs. And anyone who threatens that peace is not part of your future. Keep walking, keep rising, keep trusting the silence, because it's not empty, it's full of everything you were never given. And now, it belongs to you. Let it fill you, let it free you, and let it remind you every single day, you don't need to speak to be heard. You don't need to fight to be free. You just need to walk away, and never look back. You don't need closure from someone who was never open. You don't need answers from the same mind that gave you confusion. You don't need peace from someone who thrived in your chaos. The moment you accepted that some people will never give you what they took away, is the moment you took your power back. And that power isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It doesn't chase. Real power is still. It walks away when something no longer feels right. It lets go when respect is no longer present. It chooses silence not because it's weak, but because it's wise. When you disconnect from someone who repeatedly hurt you, it's not bitterness, it's self-respect. It's the understanding that love without consistency is manipulation, that attention without intention is a trap, that words without behavior are empty. You've learned this through pain, through cycles, through giving the benefit of the doubt one too many times. But not anymore. You've reached a depth within yourself where you no longer react to chaos. You rise above it. You no longer explain your boundaries. You embody them. And you no longer fear being misunderstood, because you finally understand yourself. You're not healing to return to what broke you. You're healing to become someone who will never accept it again. And that means releasing the need to be seen by the ones who were blind to your worth. That means giving up the fantasy that they'll wake up and apologize, that they'll suddenly value what they lost. Because if they had the capacity to honor you, they never would have risked losing you. People don't destroy what they truly value, and people don't abandon what they're afraid to live without. So when they let you go, believe them. This is your time now. Not to prove anything, not to perform for validation, but to evolve, to elevate, to become unavailable to the patterns that once held you hostage. You don't need to burn bridges, you just need to stop crossing them. Let the distance teach them what your presence used to give freely. Let your silence become the lesson their ego refused to learn. Let your peace be the loudest statement you ever make. You are not responsible for their awakening. You are responsible for your own alignment. And that means detaching, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. Reclaiming your focus, resetting your standards, rebuilding your life without the weight of their dysfunction. Every time you choose yourself, you break a cycle. Every time you stay silent, instead of explaining yourself, you protect your energy. Every time you walk away with grace, you affirm your worth. This is the revolution. Quiet, internal, unshakable. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be remembered. You just need to keep rising. Because while they sit in the ruins of your absence, trying to piece together what they lost, you'll be out of reach, out of range, and finally, out of the storm. There is something unstoppable about the person who no longer waits to be chosen. Something unshakable in the soul that finally realizes it doesn't need permission to walk away. When you stop chasing validation, you start creating value. And that shift changes everything. Because the people who once took you for granted no longer have access to the version of you who tolerated it. You're no longer available for the mind games, the half-efforts, the lukewarm apologies. You're no longer interested in fixing what was never built with care. You're focused now, focused on peace, on growth, on becoming whole without needing to be completed by anyone. When your silence becomes louder than your words, they will feel it, not right away, but slowly, in the spaces where your energy used to live, in the moments when they expect you to answer, to react, to return, and you don't. That's when the weight of their choices catches up to them. That's when your absence starts to echo louder than your presence ever did. And no matter how far they try to run from that realization, it will find them. Because you were not just someone passing through, you were the piece they didn't know how to hold. There is a cost to mishandling a soul like yours. A quiet collapse that happens in the absence of what once held everything together. And it doesn't come from anger, it comes from truth. From the undeniable reality that they lost something rare, and they lost it for good. You don't need to remind them. You don't need to circle back. Let them feel what it's like to stand in the emptiness they created. Let them wrestle with the silence, not as a punishment, but as a mirror. Because the version of you that kept showing up, even while breaking, no longer exists. You've outgrown the version of yourself that accepted less just to keep someone close. You're not here to beg for bare minimum. You're not here to shrink so someone else can feel tall. You're here to rise. And sometimes rising means becoming unreachable to the ones who never thought you'd actually leave. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. That's knowing your worth on such a deep level that you no longer negotiate it. That's freedom. The kind they'll never understand until it's too late. So protect your peace like it's the only thing that matters, because it is. Guard your mind. Honor your heart. Speak less. Move intentionally. Keep walking in the direction of your highest self. The people meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself to stay connected. They will meet you with presence, not confusion, with effort, not excuses. Until then, stay grounded in your truth. Stay rooted in your value, and let those who couldn't see it be humbled by your silence. Let them collapse under the weight of what they never appreciated, because your energy was never theirs to waste. And now, it belongs to you again, fully, finally, and forever. Some people only recognize your worth when your silence becomes permanent, when your presence no longer cushions the weight of their chaos, When the version of you that used to explain, defend, and tolerate has vanished into the version that simply no longer reacts, that's when the shift begins, not in you, but in them. Because there is no impact greater than the absence of someone who once gave deeply and without hesitation. The stillness you now offer isn't empty. It's full of boundaries. It's full of healing. It's full of a power that no longer waits to be seen by those who look straight through you. And maybe they thought you'd always be there. Maybe they confused your patience with weakness, your kindness with neediness. But every soul has a threshold. Every heart has a moment where it no longer bends, it breaks. And in that breaking, something sacred awakens, the realization that you cannot be the glue in relationships built on neglect, that your love isn't supposed to feel like a rescue mission, that your energy is sacred, and pouring it into people who don't value it isn't generosity, it's self-abandonment, and you are done abandoning yourself. This is the rise that happens in the quiet, the transformation that begins when you choose distance over drama, peace over chaos, self-respect over connection at any cost. You are no longer trying to prove your worth in spaces that diminish it. You are no longer fighting to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. Let them think you're cold. Let them believe you changed. You did. You stopped trying to carry what was never yours. You stopped trying to fix people who benefit from being broken. You stopped confusing love with sacrifice. And now, your silence speaks a language only the awake will understand. You owe no explanation for your evolution. You owe no closure to people who created their own confusion. Growth isn't a dialogue, it's a decision to step out of the storm and realize that you were never the chaos. You were the calm fighting to survive inside it. And now that you've stepped away, they can sit with the silence, they can face the mirror, they can feel the weight of what they took for granted, and maybe it will humble them. Maybe it won't. But that's no longer your concern. Your concern now is your healing, your future, your alignment. You are building a life that doesn't require constant justification, a reality where your peace isn't negotiable, a mindset where you don't chase, you choose, you don't beg, you become. And the more you honor this version of yourself, the more untouchable you become to the patterns that once trapped you. This isn't revenge, this is resurrection. This is the becoming that follows the breaking. And this time, no one gets to interrupt it. Let them sit in the silence they created. You have a life to rise into. Not everyone deserves access to the version of you that's been rebuilt through fire. Not everyone earns the right to witness your peace after surviving their chaos. There is a quiet power in choosing who gets to experience you. Because not all connections are sacred. Some are lessons wrapped in pain, designed to wake you up. And now, you're awake. Not bitter, not closed off, just aware. Aware of how deeply your energy matters. Aware of how quickly your light can be drained when given without boundaries. Aware that love without mutual respect is not love. It's erosion. You are no longer available for erosion. When you detach, you aren't giving up. You're choosing to protect what you've rebuilt. You're choosing to rise instead of repeat. And while they may misinterpret your silence as weakness, it is actually the loudest declaration of your worth. You are no longer performing emotional labor for people who refuse to carry their own weight. You're not holding space for those who only show up when they need something. That part of you, the fixer, the over-explainer, the one who held in their own pain just to keep others comfortable, that part has retired. And what stands in its place is someone who understands the value of emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is what stops you from reacting when provoked. It's what keeps you from sending one more message that won't change anything. It's the strength to walk away not because you don't care, but because you finally do, about yourself. It's the kind of strength that isn't loud or visible. It's the kind that happens quietly, behind closed doors, when you choose to close the chapter and not reopen it every time you feel lonely. That's growth. That's transformation. That's choosing healing over habit. They will notice your absence, but more importantly, they'll feel their own emptiness without your presence. That's not your burden to carry. It's their mirror to face. When someone is used to you always showing up, your absence feels like punishment. But it's not punishment. It's truth, the truth that you are the anchor. You are the stability. You are the peace. And now that you've withdrawn your energy, they're left to sit with the void they tried to fill with your effort, but never matched with their own. Let them feel that silence. Let them wonder. You are not responsible for their realization. You are responsible for your freedom. This is the season where you move in alignment, not attachment. You follow peace, not patterns. You are no longer reacting to emotional bait. You are reclaiming your inner space, that space where your soul breathes freely, where your heart beats without fear, where your worth is not up for negotiation. There is no power in proving, there is only power in becoming. And as you become more of who you were always meant to be, the noise fades, the need to explain dissolves, and all that remains is a grounded, rising version of you. Unshaken, unbothered, and unstoppable. You don't have to announce your growth. You don't have to prove your healing. Let your silence speak. Let your boundaries echo. There is a dignity in pulling back without resentment, without revenge, without noise. It means you've outgrown the need to be understood by those who were never truly listening. Your silence is not empty. It's full of wisdom, full of decisions, full of clarity. When you stop explaining yourself, you start reclaiming yourself. That's the shift. That's the rise. That's the moment when you step into self-respect so deeply, no chaos can pull you back into the version of you that kept chasing closure. You are not heartless for choosing distance. You are not cold for valuing peace. You've simply recognized that healing doesn't happen by returning to the place that broke you. Detachment is not the absence of love. It's the presence of strength. You can love someone and still choose yourself. You can forgive someone and never invite them back. You can care and still walk away. That balance is what sets you free. The version of you that begged for understanding, that over-explained, that sacrificed peace just to keep people around. That version didn't fail. It just learned. It learned the cost of self-betrayal. It learned the pain of staying too long. And now it's choosing to live differently. Let them wonder why you're silent. Let them feel the weight of your absence. You don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you when they contributed to your wounds. You don't need to justify the boundaries that protect your soul. You don't have to make it make sense to anyone who dismissed your pain. You owe yourself loyalty now. You owe yourself peace. And that loyalty doesn't require explanation. It requires consistency. Show up for yourself like you showed up for everyone else. Be the one who chooses not to abandon yourself anymore. This is not about punishing anyone. It's about liberating yourself. It's about no longer needing to keep people in your life just to avoid the discomfort of being alone. Because alone isn't empty when you're full of self-respect. Alone isn't scary when you're surrounded by peace. Alone becomes sacred when it's filled with intention, growth, and truth. And from that place, real power is born. The kind of power that doesn't control others, but controls your own reactions. The kind of power that doesn't seek revenge, but seeks elevation. The kind of power that walks away without burning bridges, because it knows silence is the loudest response. Let them sit with their own reflection. Let them navigate their own noise. You've done enough. You've tried enough. You've given more than enough. Now it's your turn. Your turn to move forward without guilt. Your turn to rise without hesitation. Your turn to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because in many ways, it does. The next level of your life requires a quieter heart, a clearer mind, and a stronger boundary. And you're ready. You've earned it. You've become it. Peace isn't something you stumble upon. It's something you protect. It's the quiet strength behind every decision not to argue, not to chase, not to beg. It's the power you hold when you no longer feel the need to defend your worth to those who couldn't see it. Real peace comes when you stop entertaining the chaos you used to tolerate. It shows up when you finally realize that not every battle is yours to fight, not every opinion is yours to absorb, and not every presence is worthy of your energy. The moment you stop trying to fix everything outside of you and start tending to the world within you, peace rises. And when peace rises, everything begins to shift. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop explaining. You start observing. You stop chasing. You start aligning. This is the elevation you were built for, the inner transformation where you become unshakable, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. That kind of strength cannot be taught. It is earned in silence, in stillness, in every moment you choose not to betray your inner calm for temporary validation. When you're no longer desperate to be seen, you begin to truly see. When you no longer need to be heard, you begin to listen more deeply. And when you no longer crave acceptance, you begin to accept yourself without conditions. There is no peace like knowing you no longer need to shrink for anyone. You don't have to tone yourself down to be digestible. You don't have to hide your depth to make others comfortable. You don't have to apologize for being exactly who you are. If your truth makes others uncomfortable, let it. If your standards intimidate them, let them walk. If your growth feels like distance, let it be. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be whole. And wholeness often requires solitude, discomfort, and decisions that others won't understand. Let them misunderstand. Let them mislabel. You're not obligated to make yourself smaller just to fit into spaces you've outgrown. You were never meant to stay in places where your soul feels restless. You weren't born to conform. You were born to rise. And rising means choosing yourself in rooms where you used to shrink. It means walking away from anything that doesn't honor your peace, your value, or your truth. You're allowed to protect your energy, even if it disappoints others. You're allowed to leave when your boundaries are violated. You're allowed to outgrow people, environments, and versions of yourself that no longer align. This is not selfish. This is survival. This is clarity. This is growth. You are not difficult. You are discerning. You are not distant. You are healing. You are not cold. You are focused. And when your energy stops bleeding into places that drain you, you begin to thrive, not because life got easier, but because you got wiser, stronger, louder in silence. And from that place, nothing can disturb the power you've built within. You weren't made to live your life constantly proving your worth. The moment you internalize that truth is the moment your power returns. You begin to see how often you've exhausted your spirit trying to earn approval that was never meant to define you. You stop performing. You stop contorting. You stop begging the world to see what's already valuable in you. The power is in knowing that your value isn't increased by validation, nor diminished by rejection. It simply exists, quietly, immovably, fully, and from that awareness, you begin to move differently. You speak less and mean more. You seek less and receive more. You fight less and win more, not through resistance but through alignment. The most powerful version of you is the one who no longer reacts to everything that seeks to pull you out of character. You know who you are.